Hello, and welcome to your OPS 245 Week 8 lecture video. It's going to be a quick lecture video today. It's only 16 slides, which is good news, I guess. So this week we're going to look at monitoring disk space. We're going to learn commands you can use to determine how much space is available. Some of the related commands to find out how much is being used by different users or in particular directories. And then you can use all of these things to perform preventative maintenance, identify problems before they arise, and deal with them before they impact your system in a bad way. So first up, we have the df command. So this displays all of the file systems that are mounted on your machine. By default, it includes the name of each file system, how much space it has, how much is in use, where it's mounted, so on and so forth. You can also use some common options like -T to display a particular type of file system. So XFS, ext4, swap. You should recognize those from when we did the partitioning in Lab 1. -H, lowercase h, gives you a human readable format. Uppercase H does the same thing, but it doesn't use the right modifier for megabytes, right? Gives you a base 1000 instead of 1024, which that's what hard drive manufacturers have been doing for years. That's why when you buy a 3 terabyte hard drive, for example, it's not really a full 3 terabytes because they measure it in weird ways. DH command is used for it's useful for a lot of things. Next up, we have the DU command, disk usage. This displays the amount of space being used by a directory, so it can be really useful for finding out which directories are taking up too much space. Some common options include -H, which will show you exactly the same thing as it does in DF, right? Human readable output. -A displays a count for all the files, not just the directories. And -C will give you a total at the end of everything and the space. So again, could be handy for finding out information. Really, like all of these things that we're looking at, they're for finding out information so you can figure out what's going on. And as a sysadmin, that's an important job. It's a very important part of the job. The find command, which you learned last semester, right? Played around with it a little bit anyway. It's a handy thing because it lets you find files in the file system based on different things, like size, for example, right? So you could use find -size to specify sizes bigger than a certain size or smaller than a certain size or within a range, which is super, super handy. When you're specifying the size with this, you usually want to add the suffix, so K for kilobytes, M for megabytes, G for gigabytes, right? Example here, find from where. It's the next thing you need, so here would be from root, right? Size greater than 100,000 kilobytes. Or we have another option here, find from in your home directory with a size less than 1 megabyte. Useful stuff. Now all of these commands that we've talked about, df, du, find, they help you figure out what's going on your disk and find out which users or files are taking up all your space. And they all do things a bit differently, and they all have slightly unique uses, right? You're not just going to use one of these, you're going to use all of them to find out information. df is nice because it has it's got a nice display. It shows you what percentage of each file system is full, and you can monitor this over time to see how quickly you're running out of space. Using it on a user's home directory tells you how much space they're taking up with it, though they might not have all their files in their home directory, right? If they've got write access to other file systems or shared file systems, then they're going to have files there as well. The find command lets you find excessively big files. You can also use it to find all the files owned by a particular user. So this could be useful if you're going to remove a user and you want to remove any unnecessary files. You want to make sure you got everything. Now, you could run these commands on your own, but I've said time and time again that a good sysadmin is a lazy one, right? So you're going to automate these sorts of tasks. There's a really cool command running on the system all the time, cron, that we can use to automate tasks. Now cron is kind of weird. It's not like any command you've ever used because you don't have to start it. It's just already there running in Linux. And you tell cron when you want it to run certain things and it will do it. It's a scheduling system within Linux. Isn't that awesome? I use cron all the time for all kinds of stuff. So it's short for chronometer, which is a device for measuring time. And it's a service daemon that's running on the system, like I just finished telling you, right? You can add to its list of tasks to be run at specific dates and time, or to be repeated on a regular basis. There's files that hold these lists, and they're in var spool cron, but you don't manually edit them. You never manually edit them. As an admin, this could be useful because maybe you need to I'm going to just ignore that bullet point. I was trying to make that make sense, but no. It's useful as an admin because you're going to use this to automate things like maybe cleaning up excess files or old files. That's like in the context of what we've been talking about, right? Or large files, excessively large files. Those could be useful things. But you can also use this for things like automating backups, automating bringing services, like restarting services. Maybe you want to restart the Apache server every week, once a week for some reason. I don't know, right? And using cron means you don't have to sit around. You don't have to be, sleeping in bed at home with an alarm going off at 3 o'clock in the morning, knowing that, oh, you need to get up to do something, right? You can just tell the system to do it, and it'll do it. And you tend to want to do large maintenance for things like this at hours when the system is under its least amount of use. So that's what makes cron awesome. You can just set it up and it'll just run. Usually when you're issuing something, you want to set it at kind of a funky time too, right? So like not an even time, because a lot of system processes run at even times, especially if you're doing something that's going to be system intensive, like a backup, or maybe you're scheduling updates or something like that, right? So you tend to want to do these at like 2 minutes to midnight or something like that. It's an Iron Maiden reference for anyone who likes metal. I like metal. I've mentioned this. So to interact with cron, you use the cron tab command, which is short for cron table. And it allows you to do things like edit your cron table, list your cron table, -E to edit, -L to list. You want to delete your cron table, -R, that'll do it. And this one only works with sudo access, right? But maybe you want to see what's in somebody else's cron tab. So you just use -U and then the user, and you'll be able to edit, list, or delete a particular user's cron tab because maybe they've automated something stupid and you want to get rid of it. Just throwing it out there. Could happen. Now cron table entries, or cron tab entries, look kind of funny initially because it's just a bunch of numbers, and there's other shortcuts for referencing these that may not be numbers. Numbers are special characters. There's 5 of them. And then a command to be executed. Now that command could be the path to a script, and if you're using a script, you want to include an absolute path, not a relative path. Just because you want to make sure you're running the script and that it runs. And they look something like this. You've got 5 fields. The first one, well, we'll get into the fields in a minute, right? So the fields could have a number or a word representation for months and days of the week. It could contain an asterisk or a star that will indicate all possible values for that field. You could have a hyphen separated or comma separated list. Hyphen separated would be a range, right? Comma separated would be maybe you want not exactly a range, but a few options. The first field, reading from left to right, is the minute between 0 and 59. The hour is the next one over, and that's military time, right? So 0 to 23. 0 is midnight, 23 is 11 p.m. It's military time. You hit 12, you just keep counting up. 12 noon, that is. The next field over, the middle field, the third one, is day of the month. It could be a range between 1 and 31. A note on this, make sure it's a day that exists if you're going to specify the next field over as well, which is the month, right? So you don't want to run something on February 30th or 31st, because that isn't going to run, right? Like ever. Fourth field over, we've got month, so we could use numbers, 1 to 12, or the 3-letter short form for each month, Jan, February, March, Mar for March, so on and so forth. And then that last field, that's the day of the week, which accepts values 0 through 7. Weird thing here, Sunday can be represented as 0 or 7, because some people like to think that Sunday is the last day of the week, and some people like to think Sunday is the first day of the week, and it doesn't matter which camp you fall into, the cron tab is flexible. I don't really know or care, I've never really thought about it too much, but could be the first day, could be the last day, who knows. And then, again, you've got your command to be executed, which is usually an absolute path. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, just like having access to sudo, not everyone needs access to cron, right? So there's 2 files in the file system that limit who can create cron tables. And these are both in etc. You know it's an important file because it's in the etc. directory. Cron allow and cron deny are the 2 file names. And you can guess what those do, right? Cron allow lists or is used to list users who are allowed to use cron. Cron deny is used to list users who are not allowed to use cron. And you should use one or the other, not both. Cron allow probably makes the most sense because there's probably going to be fewer people that are allowed to use cron than there are that are not allowed to use cron. So maybe that's the way you want to go. Don't use both. And if that wasn't confusing enough with cron, there's another way to do it that's maybe a little bit easier. You can just take your script, or usually make a symbolic link to it, a symlink, and stick it in one of these directories, cron hourly, cron daily, cron weekly, or cron monthly in etc. And it'll just run it then. So that's another way. You don't even have to deal with cron tabs. You just stick it in there, it'll run. It's pretty awesome. And since those 5 fields can be a bit confusing, there's a couple ways to got cut off. There's a couple ways to represent them in a different way. So at reboot will run every time at startup, and there's no equivalent using the 5 different fields. At yearly or at annually, both do the same thing. They'll run on January 1st at midnight. Monthly will run on the 1st of the month, every month at midnight. Weekly will run every single day at midnight. Daily does pretty much the same. Weekly will run once a week on Sunday. Daily runs every single day at midnight. So Sunday at midnight for weekly, every day at midnight for daily. You could also use at midnight, which does the same thing. And at hourly runs once an hour. So instead of your 5 number or character field, you just stick one of those in and you're good to go. Now it got cut off a bit, but Crontab Guru is actually a pretty handy resource for this. I can't even, it's cut off in the slide. I don't know why. So if you're not too sure and you don't want to sit down and figure this out, you can just use that. And that's how people really do things. I usually suffer and figure it out because I don't use it that often. But I do use it. It's a handy thing. Now there's a couple tricky things about cron that you need to be aware of. Any output that would go to standard output, well, there's no place for it to go, right? There's no terminal attached to cron. So it gets sent to the owner of the file using the internal mail command. So you'll just get in your mailbox. You could redirect things somewhere else as well, right? So that's commonly what you do in a script with cron. And usually what I do if I'm automating a script with cron or automating something is in the last line of the script, I'll have it send an email saying it completed. Maybe the last couple lines because I like a nice formatted email telling me what's going on, right? But have it send you an email. You're already automating the process. It's a lot nicer to be able to just look at your phone in the morning when you wake up and have had enough coffee to read something and say, oh yeah, I got an email. That means the cron job ran last night. It's going to be an easy day at the office. A lot easier to deal with that. Any output can't go anywhere, right? Standard out going to the terminal can't happen because there isn't one. So that brings us to, wow, look at that, 17-minute lecture. Brings us to the end of our lecture this week. Isn't that awesome? So this week we're going to work on, before we get too carried away, this week we're going to work on Lab 5, just Investigation 1, which shouldn't be too bad. And the Python in this week's activity, or this week's lab, actually just straight up worked. So there's no additional Python to work on there. As another side note, I do have all of your midterms marked and all of your marks in up to date. I haven't marked assignment 1 because that's not due until the end of the week, right? But have a look. Let me know if I missed anything. And if you have any questions, ask me in class. I'll take a look. So with all that in mind, take care, be safe. I hope you had a safe and happy long weekend. And I will see you in this week's class. Bye for now.